Yes, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Rothner. In order to be politically correct, I have to begin with disclosures about conflicts. I have two conflicts. One is, I think Dr. Rothner is a great guy. And the second is, I think he's one of the best doctors I have ever seen. So you have my bias right in front of you. He begins life as the second-born child to Jewish immigrant parents. He has a total of 4 other siblings. You see them in the picture here. Interesting, they don't look anything alike, but each of them has been very, very successful in their life's activity. David was born in Chicago, Illinois. Here's a picture of the shoreline. Now, if you were at the meeting last year and heard Roger Packer before the Sachs lecture, he made mention of the fact that from a very small neighborhood in Chicago, there were a total of 8 child neurologists who came from that small neighborhood. And yesterday, I encountered the 9th. So, here is a map of Chicago. It was called Albany Park. Here's a list of the 8, now the 9th, Bob Eagle also. So 9 child neurologists from one very small area. This caught my fancy, so I did some research to try to figure out what might be responsible for this somewhat strange and even alien kind of idea. And so finally I came across a very important scientific article in one of the best journals around. It was finally revealed in the National Enquirer that there had been some photos taken above the city of Chicago back when, and in analyzing it, it was seen that there had been a spaceship over that, which was sending out rays that somehow it was an experiment in producing child neurologists. So we now know Dr. Rothner's secret. Before he became a child neurologist, obviously he had to become a physician. David went to the University of Illinois in Chicago, where he graduated, and during the time that he was there, he married his childhood sweetheart, Sarah. Sarah's here in the audience, and they have just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. Two lovely children who have also been able to join them for this occasion, each of them successful in their own way. David is very, very family conscious. Here he is with his children and his 6 grandchildren. And the one on the left, the one in the uniform, just married last week. So David is going to become a great grandfather at some point in the future. Okay, so what happened after medical school? He did the beginning of his training at the Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital in Chicago. And then he had something about Presbyterians. He went to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York, where he finished his pediatric training. At that point, he was reluctantly volunteered for the Army. But his worth was quickly realized, and he rose to the rank of major, and he spent 2 years at Fort Riley, Kansas. After those 2 years, he went on to complete his pediatric neurology training at the Columbia Neurological Institute. Well, eventually he has to go make a living. So David starts off in his car to go to Chicago, but runs out of gas in Cleveland. So while he was there, they offered him a job. He became the first child neurologist at the Cleveland Clinic. But he was told, he was warned, that there were certainly not enough children for him to spend his entire career only seeing children, and he would have to see adult patients as well. That didn't last very long. In a very short time, he needed help. So, being the respectful son that he was, he went to his father for advice. And his father offered 3 pieces of advice. The first is, hire someone who knows something you don't. So now there were 2 people at the Cleveland Clinic. The second was, hire someone who isn't afraid to work hard. And now there were 3 people at the Cleveland clinic. And then he said, hire someone who's smarter than you are. And he hired a fourth person. So, in the end, what did David accomplish in his years at the Cleveland Clinic? And by the way, he never strayed. His entire career has been at the one institution. Originally, David's major interest in terms of clinical work was in epilepsy. And by the late 1970s, there was an pediatric epilepsy clinic. By the early 1980s, a monitoring unit, and we were doing epilepsy surgery in children by the mid-1980s. But pediatric epilepsy, in a sense, became its own specialty, and so David turned to other interests. His two other major interests were neurofibromatosis and headaches in children. He saw so many children in the clinic, he realized that not all of them could be taken care of with medications alone. So he began a rather innovative, actually an inpatient, multidisciplinary pain clinic, which specialized in kids with chronic daily headaches who had not responded to medication, but also took in children with other sources of chronic pain. And to measure his success, you can see that of those who participated in this ongoing program, 80% were able to return to school. He established a training program in pediatric headache. He spoke endlessly at various lay and medical meetings to introduce the idea of the importance of headaches in children, and he wrote the definitive book about headaches in children. Over his lifetime so far, he's published over 120 papers, including this initial one in 1966. I think at that point, David thought that the stones in cholelithiasis were brain stones, but he was wrong. He's written 38 chapters in addition to his book. His other passion was education. He began the Educational Fellowship Program in 1976, and over the years has trained 57 child neurologists. He was also interested in the future of our profession and began a program for college students in order to help make them interested in child neurology, and for many years was the head of the patient education clinic. He never lost his human touch. David knew how to have a good time. There were many patients who were very grateful to him, and here's one of them, for curing their headaches. He surrounded himself with the staff, who was all work and no play, as you can see in this slide here. When not at work, he and Sarah are frequent participants at antique shows and flea markets, where he's interested in old medication ads. So I asked David, is it over? And he said no. He's still finding things that are new and interesting. He's very much into training new child neurologists and furthering the career of his colleagues. So on behalf of the staff of the Cleveland Clinic, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Dr. David Rothner.
Recognizing those who have done good for you and keeping that recognition for the rest of your life. My wife and I, Sarah, have been through difficult times. We'd like to thank the good Lord for keeping us alive and upright. My parents who came from Europe and believed in their children's education. My brothers and sisters, my children and grandchildren who have always supported me. I wanted to thank some of my teachers who are no longer with us, Dr. Sidney Carter, Niels Lowe, Richard Konigsberger, those who are still with us and made me what I am, Dr. Abe Katorian, Dr. Arnold Gove. Now, you can't do this alone. So my wife, Sarah, I've said thank you to. Sarah, will you stand up for a second? Who's been my nurse and worked with me for 40 years and is in a large part responsible for the success we've had at the Cleveland Clinic. Marge,